Well, a very good morning, everyone. I'm Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and I'd like to welcome you to this special investor webinar with Australian gold developer Ausgold, ASX ticker code AUC. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Today's webinar follows a number of key milestones for Ausgold, including the company's recent board renewal announcement and a landmark $38 million capital raising. Joining us for a live Q&A session this morning, we're very pleased to have Ausgold's new Executive Chair, John Dorward, who's beaming in from Melbourne. Good morning, John. Nice to see you there.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thanks for having me.
As well as the company's Managing Director, Matt Greentree, who joins me here in Perth. Good morning, Matt.
Yeah, good morning.
I had the opportunity to sit down with John and Matt in Perth last week, and we recorded a comprehensive interview on the outlook for Ausgold, their vision for the company, and their development strategy for the 3 million ounce Katanning gold project located just south of Perth in WA. We're going to have a listen to that interview now before we return to join John and Matt for a live Q&A session. If I could just remind everyone to please use the Q&A tab on your webinar browser to log your questions while the interview is playing. I'll ensure that we put all of your questions to John and Matt, and I'm sure they'll do their very best to answer them. With that introduction, please enjoy this interview on Ausgold. Hi, I'm Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and it's a great pleasure to be introducing WA gold development company Ausgold, and I'm very pleased to have the senior leadership from Ausgold with me today. John Dorward, the Executive Chairman, and Matt Greentree, the Managing Director. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas.
It's been a big few weeks for Ausgold on the back of a board renewal announcement and a capital raising, a $38 million capital raising. So, John, I thought I might kick it off with you. Welcome on board.
Thank you very much.
For the benefit of Ausgold shareholders, perhaps if you could just tell us a bit about your background and what attracted you to the company.
Sure, absolutely. Basically, I have a mining development background, so getting involved in companies where there's a resource, and when you can see that there's a mine, and you might not know how big and what the cost is going to be and everything like that, but there's a point where you can see a resource is going to turn into a mine, and I think that's where we are now, and that's really been the sweet spot for me in my career. Most recently, I was the CEO at a company called Ausgold, which was a Canadian listed company where we built an underground gold mine in Burkina Faso and acquired an open pit project from Newcrest in the Ivory Coast, and we were in the process of building that second mine when we got acquired by another TSX listed company. And prior to that, I was with another Canadian listed company with assets in the US called Frontier Gold, which was acquired by Newmont in 2011. So it's really about seeing a company that has a project that's going to make the cut and then trying to develop that as efficiently as possible.
So there's a fair track record of value creation there. Ausgold was a great story. Burkina Faso, quite a different environment to the southwest of WA and the Katanning project.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about what you see as the highlights of Katanning, and I'm guessing you probably did a fair bit of due diligence on the company as well.
For sure, and I think there's really three main sort of legs to the stool. The first is, I can see deep value opportunity for a 3 million ounce gold project that's there today. So what you see with Katanning today, and it's, a feasibility study is coming down the pike very soon, you can see that there's a really good value opportunity to de-risk the project, take it through the development milestones, finance it, build it, and get it into production. And I think what you see today will be worth a lot more when that process happens. So that's the traditional de-risking and growth sort of scenario. Second is really the potential for expansion on the mine trend. If you have a look at what Matt and the team have sort of been able to deliver at Katanning to date with 3 million ounces, I think that gets a lot bigger. I think that, and you can speculate about how much, but and Matt will take you through the potential, but there's a ton more exploration potential along strike, down plunge and down dip. So I think the Katanning gets bigger just from what you can see today. And then the third aspect, I think, is the most intriguing one, is the regional package that the company's put together. I mean, they're the first mover on what's been only recently identified as a greenstone belt, and have 5,500 square kilometres of tenement. So I think that what we're going to see is a string of regional discoveries And then ultimately these regional deposits can be trucked into the central mill at Katanning. So I see it really similar to what we did when I was at Mineral Deposits. We built the Sabodala Gold Project, the first modern gold mine in Senegal. It was really one mill to rule the district. And the district's already been consolidated under the ownership of Ausgold, so I think there's really a ton of potential there as well.
Fantastic. I'm sure shareholders will love to hear that. Matt, you've been with this story for a few years. You've taken the resource from, I think, around 400,000 ounces from memory to over 3 million ounces. Yep. Can you just give us a snapshot of the project and where it stands currently and what's sort of happening at the moment?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a 3 million ounce resource. We put that out September last year. It's been a growth story since I came on board. Pretty cheap discovery cost to $11 per resource ounce. So I've been pretty focused on, I guess, understanding the geology, getting the science right, because I think that's where in the past this region's probably been misunderstood and overlooked. As John also mentioned, that it's really only been understood as a greenstone belt fairly recently. So if you look at a map even 5 years ago, it wasn't recognised as greenstone as you would see in the rest of the Yilgarn. So I put our foot on 5,500 kilometres of tenure around our main resource area. So we've been very strategic in that. And I think that's where we'll start to see some movement in the near term. We've been doing some drilling over the last few weeks at Duggan and Nanakup Bridge prospects. So some results pending on that. But those areas on that Stanley trend, I think, are where we see in the exploration team sees some immediate growth potential and discovery. The main project itself, though, is still open. We're really focused on what's called the central zone. That's given us 90% of that 3 million ounces. The southern zone is still open. It's equally long strike length. The focus has been on the central zone because it delivered high-grade results early. The southern zone just needs more work, and equally the northern zone. So it's a 17-kilometre mineralised trend. So it's a big area, but we've really been taking piecemeal and following our success.
So lots of upside. There's clearly going to be an exploration story unfolding here.
Absolutely.
But importantly, you have got a DFS, a definitive study,
in the pipeline.
Advanced.
Yes.
Where is that up to?
So look, we stepped back a little bit. We're due to have that released, but with the changes at board level and a much more technical board as well. So if you look at Mark Turner and Adrian Goldstone's CVs, they're mine builders as well. So we've really upskilled the board as well as adding, some capital behind it. It's also bringing the people in as well. There's some key appointments coming alongside them as well in terms of permitting, project direction as well. So there's a lot happening in the company, and that's the reason why we've pushed back the DFS to the second half of the year. And there's a lot of work going into that now, but we are very advanced on a lot of the mining studies already, and really just bringing that in line with the permitting.
Can I ask you about timing on the DFS?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably early fourth quarter is really where we're looking at.
Yep.
Yeah.
John, I was going to go back to you. Katanning is the biggest free milling open pit development project currently in Australia, as far as I'm aware, certainly Western Australia. I wanted to get your perspective, particularly given your global history in the industry, of how it fits in the development landscape and why that's quite a unique asset, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've been working in West Africa for a number of years and also US and Canada. And to have 3 million ounces with really good metallurgy and so much exploration upside within 3 hours of Perth is really, somewhat unique. I think if I look at a lot of the projects that you look at in North America and Canada in particular, challenging access, remote, a lot of water, lakes, rivers to deal with, quite a lot of environmental issues. And you just don't see that here. This project sits in the wheat belts, 3 hours south of Perth. Access is great. You've got all the skills that you can require and suppliers that you need to build a mine. So it really is perfectly set for a development and on a reasonably short time frame. So you just don't see that, sort of in some of the jurisdictions I've been working in recently.
I did notice that there was a great quote from one of the company's biggest shareholders that likened Ausgold to Capricorn in terms of the scale, the ounces, the fact it's open pit, and he made some quite favourable comparisons there. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, look, Jonathan's a very seasoned investor and he's a high conviction investor, and I've known him for a long time, and he was an investor at Ausgold. Basically, really does go in heavy with his investments and does a lot of work. He's got a very strong technical team. I had the benefit of sort of drafting behind that team on my initial due diligence. So we had Julian Barnes, one of the founders of RSG, and Adrian Goldstone, who's liked what he saw so much, he joined the board. So I took that as a very strong endorsement. I think for me, as part of my initial work as well, was to see, okay, what does, a multi-million ounce 1 gram, 1 to 1.25 gram deposit look like? And I think the analogy that Jonathan made to Capricorn is valid as far as it goes. I mean, it's a different mine, different company. Sure. But it does show that a well-executed plan that's built up, with the company that's got a good track record can be valued very significantly in the Australian market. And I think, for me at least, it's a pathfinder that there's potentially a lot of headroom for us in terms of valuation to go from our current market capitalisation to what, a project, successfully delivered project could look like. So that was encouraging. Absolutely.
It's a great message for shareholders because Capricorn has been one of the standout success stories of the last few years. Matt, jumping back into a little bit of exploration, because I believe you did start drilling recently. Yes. What are you drilling, and what's the plan from an exploration perspective?
Yes, so what we're drilling at the moment is on the eastern side. So we're stepped off the main Katanning trend to what we call the Stanley trend. It's 130 kilometres long. It's mineralised along its strike length. It's a big structure. Big structures host big deposits. What we've found in the past, though, at Stanley, Nanacup Bridge and at Duggan is some very high-grade results. So we're trying to understand those high-grade results and see where that takes us in terms of resource potential. A satellite deposit, once we've built a mill here, has a very low hurdle to development. And that's what we're looking for is, can we bring high-grade material into the mine plan for Katanning? There's some really good results already we've seen at Duggan, and we're hoping to extend that out. And I think Duggan and Nanacup Bridge are both the ones that we identified early as places that we want to understand because of their potential.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from what Matt said, look, the idea, the opportunity for us to change the narrative for the positive is to find something on the regional package. Yep. I have no doubt, and I'm sure Matt will agree, that there's plenty of gold to find on the Katanning mine trend. And that's, from a capital allocation perspective, there's a question, do we do that now? And do we add to what's already a very economic project? Or do we try and find something different that really changes the math sort of significantly? Yep. And we think that a shallow, high-grade deposit that's within easy trucking distance of Katanning would be very accretive. And I say that in the context that the mine schedule that we expect to see in the feasibility study, and certainly you saw in the pre-feas and the scoping study, was that it delivers very high-grade material in the first 5 years. So the challenge for us, or the opportunity, is to then supplement that with additional high grade, and that's what I think really starts to sort of blow the doors off of this project as a sort of as a gold district in itself. Yes. And that's what we'd like to do. Look, I think if we had access to unlimited capital, I think we'd probably have multiple drill rigs turning on the mine trend and would be adding lots and lots of ounces. Not to say that we, wouldn't take much to tempt me to do that, and I'm sure Matt would agree, being a geologist. But we have to be sensible, and at the moment we think the best strategy is to progress the project into production, but also try and start to unpack a little bit of that potential on the regional package. Because if we can validate that with a nice high-grade deposit that then comes into the mine plan, then I think it should be very significant for the company. And having a dual-track strategy is always handy as well, isn't it? Going through the classic Lassonde curve of a developer. I think Pierre Lassonde now refers to it as the Valley of Death. So yeah, I mean, we're very keen. and we did that at Ausgold. We kept drilling all the way through, and we were adding ounces, testing regional targets. I think it's exactly the right thing for a company to be doing. You can't stand still. You can't get bogged down in just doing one thing. I mean, delivering a project is obviously very important, but we think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Absolutely.
You talked about capital there, and obviously, like any junior, Ausgold's been capital constrained, which is probably why this recent raise is so important. It's a decent size raise, $38 million, and it's really elevated the company, I think, globally in terms of the level and the calibre of investor that's come on board. Can you talk us through that and your perspectives on why it's important?
Sure. Look, I mean, the three key factors for success that I've certainly seen in my career. You need project, people, and money. You need the right project, and I think that's definitely a tick for Katanning. You need the right people, and we're in the process now of building that team out. As Matt said, he was the only technical director on the board up until 5 or 6 weeks ago. He's now been augmented with 2 very seasoned mine builders. So I think, and we'll build the team out below Matt as well. So that people question will be answered, and then the money, which is sometimes the hardest part of the equation. And I think the financing that we're just wrapping up at the moment really does position the company, probably for the first time, or at least certainly the first time in a number of years, to be really well capitalised. Not hand to mouth, not come issue all the time. It's going to let us spend the money that we need to do to both explore and deliver a project ready to that mining, that decision to mine point. And I don't think that's, the mindset change that brings can't be underestimated. That's a key thing for the company, and we're now going to walk. We're going to walk tall and deliver this project.
Yeah, fantastic. I've been hearing of growing interest from global investors in the Australian gold scene, and I think you were both on an international roadshow quite recently. What was the level of interest like in what you were doing? I imagine it would have been a new story for a lot of those people.
It was, and I think there was a dual purpose to that. Really, there was, I think, an extreme valuation opportunity compared to some of those examples of what we've seen and some of the success stories that have come out of Australia. I thought, certainly with my experience in North America, that this needed to be brought to the attention of North American and European investors. The second, I think, really is that, we're going to be, we've got a lot of work to do over the next sort of 18 months, and then we're going to come to a decision to mine. We needed to start to build the register that could help lift us into production, and that's, to start bringing some new institutions to the capital structure.
Sure.
That, hopefully they get in now, they have a positive experience, and then they're there for the lift into production. And we're looking, it's a broad church at Ausgold. There's plenty of room for lots of different people.
Sounds great. Looking ahead, it's obviously going to be a very busy period now that the money's in the tin, and you've got a clear path forward and a clear mandate to become one of Australia's next significant gold producers. Talk us through the next, maybe if I could ask both of you to just talk us through the next couple of years and how things are going to play out in terms of news flow.
Next couple of years, okay. So
it's a big question.
I'll start with the nearer term things. Obviously, the DFS is something that's important. We've also in the process of acquiring some of the properties that will house infrastructure. So that's quite close over the next few weeks, in fact. So really, the going forward from that is building out the team, and we'll see that over the next few months as we go into DFS. Which will be towards the back end of this year.
Yep.
One of the important things will be the permitting. We expect that around the mid of next year, 25, and that'll take us towards the final investment decision. So that's probably one of those 2 key milestones there, the permitted project and taking it to a financing decision. And that's leads into an 18-month build.
Yep. So roughly 26 for construction. And then through into
27 gold
pour. Yep. And just a quick one on permitting, because it's a question that comes up on any new project. But what are the milestones? What are the key hurdles, I suppose, and what are the risks moving forward on that front?
Look, it's time's always the risk on those because you're dealing with government departments, like getting into the queue, and that's working pretty hard to get everything in there. We've done a lot of technical studies. A lot of the environmental values, we're working on cleared land, so we're not knocking down virgin forest or anything like that. But having said that, dealing with community as well, making sure that they're included in the story and understand it. But we've got very good support out of Katanning and the other surrounding shires to bring in a new industry into town. And so we're working on those relationships. Not ever taking that for granted, but that's something that's incredibly important to the company.
Absolutely. And John, what's your perception of the site? It's pretty unique location.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said to Matt the first time when he drove me down to Katanning, I said I felt a little uncomfortable at the start because there wasn't someone in the Hilux in front with a 50 caliber machine gun, sort of keeping an eye on things. So he assured me that it would be okay as we drove down the highway, and everything worked out. I think it's, to Matt's point about the community. I mean, when you look at the permit, I think you have to step back and say, well, what are there unique risks to the project that we're trying to advance here? And I think when you look at Katanning, there's not, at least to my mind, any standout risks that are sort of unique to Katanning. There's mining risks, generic risks that need to be managed, like all projects. But when you see the level of community support, and the first night we were down there, we met with the Shire President, the former Shire President, and the Shire CEO, and I've never seen a community as keen to see a new industry come to town and create the jobs. And as Matt sort of said on our roadshow, the population of Katanning in 1980, it was 8,000, and it's now 4,000.
Okay.
And that's a lot of families and children and kids who've moved off to look for opportunities. And I think if we can play a part in bringing that new industry with really good paying jobs and all of the ancillary industries that come from that, then I think this should be tremendous for Katanning. And we know that it's incumbent on us to make sure that the community, both in Katanning and around the area, see a lot of benefit from this, and they see a lot of benefit quickly.
Oh, fantastic. Look, it sounds really exciting. I might just finish with a quick line from each of you. If you could just, if you can, in a sentence, just, I suppose, summarise, as you see it, the investment opportunity with Ausgold.
Oh, I can start to
I get to think about it.
Yeah, right. So shooting from the hip there. Look, I think there is that threefold. We've got a project. It's going to be developed. It will be a mine. The view is now how big a mine and the opportunities in that 5,500 square kilometres. What I think is important to see that accretion for shareholders, that value realisation there. And I think we can do that both, by delivering a fantastic 3 million ounce project, but also with the drill bit.
Yeah, I think to Matt's point, I think from an investor's perspective, for me, if I put my investor's hat on, there's a clearly underwritten value story here. And I think that's quite evident to see. I think in the medium term, there's sort of low-hanging fruit to pick on for exploration growth. But then this is a whole greenstone belt, and it's owned by one company, and it has a very undemanding market capitalisation. So I think if you sort of add those things together, I think it's a sound investment, or my view anyway, today. But there is the potential, and not the insignificant potential, that this could be a very, very significant gold district in its own right. And if you jump in your time machine and travel 10 or 15 years in the future, they might be talking about, who knows what they'll be saying about the Katanning Greenstone Belt at that stage.
The good thing about having a video of this is that we'll have that to replay.
Didn't think about that.
And I'm sure that your prediction will come true. But well, look, it's been fantastic. Thanks very much, John and Matt. It's been
Nicholas.
great to have you here, and hopefully we can do one of these down on site.
Sure,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So there you have it. Thanks for everyone for listening in. That is the Ausgold story with John and Matt. We're going to be hearing a lot more from them over the coming weeks, months and years. So thanks for joining us. That's WA gold developer Ausgold, ASX code AUC. Look forward to bringing you more news and information in the coming weeks and months. Thank you. Right, well, we're back live again. John, just checking that we've still got you there.
I'm here.
And we've got Matt here in Perth. So, look, thanks for listening into that video. Hopefully that was a good overview of Ausgold and a good introduction to John particularly. That was obviously John's first appearance on one of these, and a good introduction to his thoughts on the company. So We'll go into Q&A. This is a live Q&A, and just a reminder to everyone, please jump on that browser, use the tab on the right of your screen and fire your questions in. We might start with one that was emailed to us this morning. I could perhaps direct this to you initially, John. The question is, will Ausgold need to do a JV to fund the plant, and what parameters are expected of the plant cost and working capital?
Sure. So look, I think first and foremost, the strategy for financing, and we are in the early stages of the journey, completing the feasibility study, etc. I think first and foremost, our base case is to project finance the bulk of the capital, look to balance the sort of risk of the risk of debt versus the risk of having too much dilution. So I think that there's a little bit more art than science in that. But what we'd like to do is have a reasonable balance of fairly straightforward project finance with additional equity sufficient to build the Katanning Gold Project. That sort of needs to be balanced against the requirements for hedging and price protection and things like that. So we're only sort of very much in the early days of that. But I think if we have our way, it will be a fairly classic, straightforward project finance. The question around joint ventures is an interesting one. I think for some projects that can be an effective tool, especially if there's a big mismatch between equity capital markets value, your share price and your market capitalisation, and what the ultimate project's worth. If you're trading at a deep discount to the value of the project, then you might be interested in looking at whether there's a deal to be done at the asset level, i.e. put cash in the ground and earn an interest in a joint venture. That's not our way, not the way we're looking at it at this stage. It's to keep it simple, keep 100% ownership for Katanning for Ausgold shareholders. In terms of capital, again, work in progress. I think the numbers that we put out as part of the pre-feasibility study for the smaller project, and then updated with the scoping study last year at just under $300 million is still valid. We may look to stage the project. That's work in progress. So, stage the project to reduce the upfront capital burden from what we've displayed in that scoping study. Again, to be determined in the feasibility study. And in terms of working capital, I think we're fortunate that this is a gold project, so working capital really is more limited than other projects that have longer payment cycles. You pour a bar of gold, you've got cash in your bank a couple of days later. So I think that shortens that. So working capital shouldn't be a massive challenge for us. But in answer to the question, first and foremost, straightforward project finance with equity to deliver 100% ownership to Ausgold shareholders.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Anything you'd like to add to that, Matt?
Well, I think John covered that pretty nicely.
Great. There's a question here about the company's capital structure. The comment is that the question is, with 2.7 billion shares on issue, is there potential for a buyback once the mine is up and running? Who'd like to take that one and talk about the capital structure?
Well, I think John's probably got more experience in that space than I have, so I think he's well placed for that.
Sure, thanks. So historically, I've been a fan of buybacks as opposed to dividends. I think they've typically been more capital efficient. So when we were at Roxgold, we did initiate some buybacks where we bought the shares back. We were buying them back once we were in production and cash flowing because it looked like a compelling investment opportunity. We were buying our shares back around 80 to 90 cents. And then I think, sold the company probably within about 18 months, probably less than 2 years later, for $2.80. So that worked out well for us. We saw very compelling value because of market situation at the time for a well-capitalised company with a very good balance sheet, generating cash to buy back shares that we thought were cheap. And I would expect to take the same mindset forward here at Ausgold. Dependent upon circumstances at the time, but that is a few years away from us. We would have to, get into production, pass our completion test, start paying our debt back, and then look to see what our uses of capital were, whether we had compelling investment opportunities around the Katanning project, or whether we thought that it was a sound investment to buy back the shares.
Thanks very much, John. Is there a thought process around consolidating the shares, given, I guess, to make it more appealing to North American markets?
Go, Matt?
Yeah, look, there's definitely some thought around that, and I think just stay tuned is best I can put it.
Yep. There's a question here about sort of drilling activities. Matt, if I can throw that to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could just give us a quick update on the recent drilling and when you'd expect results to start coming back from that.
Yeah, look, we should see those results coming out fairly shortly. What we've done, and as I alluded to in the interview, is we've tested 2 targets along the Stanley Trend. The first pass at those was really to start to understand some of the high-grade results we've seen in the past and see that continuity. So this is, I wouldn't say it's a definitive drill program by any stretch. It was a first taste to really start to get the ball rolling on what's a much bigger opportunity for the company in terms of that 130 kilometre strike length, what we see at Stanley. Nunnacut Bridge has always been a tantalising target, and that was the first one we drilled. And Duggan is again another area where we've seen high grade results. The hurdle for high grade ounces in this area and development is fairly low once we've got a plant in place. But I've not taken the eye off the ball. This is a very big, long-lived structure. It could host something fairly significant, and that's something that really hasn't been tested in the past. So there's, in our thought processes, there's a couple of things going on. We're looking at opportunities to augment the main Katanning project, but not taking our eye off the ball for a larger discovery.
Fantastic, thanks, Matt. There's a question that's just popped up here about metallurgical recovery. Can you please discuss that, and also tell us, is any of the ore refractory at Katanning?
No, is the first answer. There's no refractory material. It's fairly straightforward. There's very low base metal contents in here, which is almost atypical of everything I've explored for in the Yilgarn before. So very low arsenic, low lead and zinc, low antimony. It is a very, very clean ore, and that has some environmental benefits as well in terms of the way that these the tails hold on to cyanide. So that ticks a few boxes there straight away. Recoveries sit around 90%. There's been a bit of work in terms of looking at different grind sizes and to increase that recovery even more. But what we do know, the high-grade components of this resource are higher recoveries, around 93-94%. And there is a high gravity component in there. So the ore deposit itself, geologically, was formed, was metamorphosed, so it's heated up, and that's what causes this high gravity component. So we see between 30 and 70% on gravity gold, 70% being in those bonanza zones that we see in some of those glorious results we saw at Jinkers and Jinkers South, 100 gram meter type intercepts. But as you go down, the average grade is 1 gram. So that's what you see is around that 90% is that average result.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. Just a reminder to everyone listening in, while we've got the benefit of having John and Matt live and online, please take advantage of that opportunity and send your questions in. John, I think I asked you in the interview to forecast news flow 2 years out, which was a pretty big call, but an investor has asked here, is it unrealistic to ask where you could see the share price in the 3 to 5 year mark? So that's a pretty broad brush as well, but maybe if you could just give us your sort of aspirational thoughts on that.
Sure. I think if someone will give me the gold price and the market sentiment at the time in 3 or 5 years, I might be able to draw me into a prediction. I think in general, and it's hard to tell obviously hard to tell the future. I think the way I look at it is, and we'll put exploration success to the side for the moment. I think it's really about how do we ladder up the valuation of the Katanning Gold Project. And I think for us, that is de-risking the project, ticking off the various project milestones, and then putting the project into production. And what that should do, it's not a perfect measure, but if you look at, say, a valuation metric like a price to net asset value, you could look today, we have a price to NAV, depending on which analyst you might be talking to, probably would be less than 0.1. Let's just call it that. So, our share price will be around 0.1 of where this project should be worth. Now, as we de-risk the project and take it forward, holding that net asset value constant, our price should improve. So we should be looking to get to 0.3 to 0.5, ultimately approaching 1 or even more than 1 in production. So for us, it's about efficiently getting the project up that curve, putting a definitive feasibility study on the table, permitting, probably one of the main lever points for us, financing, construction, and then commissioning and into production. So really, it's about for us, and this is under our own steam. This is I think ostensibly under our own control, which is where you want to be. Would be to continue to de-risk that project and get it further and further towards the ultimate goal of being a producing gold mine. At which point it'll be worth a lot more than it is today. So I'm probably not able to give an absolute share price prediction, but I think what you should expect, and success for us will look like something approaching that, first and foremost, that net asset value, and then we can get on with growing. So we both grow both the denominator and the numerator and add value that way. So that's the route that we're going to tackle. I'm sorry, it's probably not as definitive as your viewer might have liked, but it's as far as I'm going to be pushed today.
Fair enough. Thanks, John. Look, we might just wrap up with a couple of final questions here, and you just final notice to anyone, just if you do have anything further, just fire it in. But Matt, just one for you. If the question of permitting and community comes up a fair bit with this project, maybe if you could just talk us through what's been done already on the community front and how you see that engagement playing out over the coming months and years.
So look, there's been a few direct town hall meetings where we've brought in and invited the community in, particularly after key announcements such as the pre-feasibility study and some of the announcements that have really drawn a lot of interest in the community. And that's just to stand there and answer those questions and really give our perspective on where the project's headed and set those expectations. The other things that we've done, and we've got this on our website, is gone into the community and asked them the questions that are concerning them. And we ran a confidential process that was run external from Ausgold, but commissioned by Ausgold, to really understand where people were either getting misconceptions or had concerns that were very real. So we went through that, and it did highlight a few things that we're acutely aware of, but made, I guess, more aware of. And things like housing were things that the community were very anxious about. We've got a strategy in place to deliver housing for the workforce, which will, at peak, will be around 300 during construction. That's been done in concert with the Shire and understanding what they need as well from the company as well. In terms of what they need is what they'd like and what we can offer. And it's a two-way street here. They can offer a lot to us and we can offer a lot to them. We're bringing a new industry to town, and we're just trying to understand what can be done in a timely fashion. So those interactions are ongoing, and there's a fairly open dialogue with the Shire and our presidents and CEO about what we're doing and where we're taking the project and our ultimate timelines. The other side of it is looking at the permitting, going through, looking at the environmental impacts we're going to be moving a lot of dirt. There will be some impacts. There'll be both visual, but in terms of ecological changes, is probably not as significant as some other projects because most of the woodlands have been removed during farming. So it's really just now getting into it and just understanding the impacts on that community. Mostly, we think there's going to be a net positive impact, very good economic growth for the community based on this new project. So there's, I think, a lot of ticks there, but you never take that for granted. You try and understand if there's something you've missed, and that work's going on all the time. We're really working towards, working with the community, not trying to impose a project on top of it.
Thanks very much, Matt. I might just one final one for you, John. I might let you have the last word here. You spoke in the interview about the significance of the ground position, and clearly we're talking here. This is not just about a new Australian gold mine. It's also it's an entire greenstone belt, and one that's pretty much unexplored, certainly very underexplored. Can you just leave us with a few thoughts about the significance of that from the perspective of an Ausgold investor?
Sure, absolutely. And I think this sort of hews to sort of some of the reasons why I was interested in getting involved in the company and the project. And I think if you cast your mind around to a lot of the success stories in Western Australia in particular, it's really been about tying a established processing infrastructure with an orphan satellite deposit, and often that's owned by those two parts are owned by two different companies. One mining company owns processing infrastructure. Another company has something of a stranded orphan resource that may not be big enough to justify development. Mining company acquires said project, puts it through their mill, lots of value created, and most of that value probably accreting to the owner of the infrastructure. I think in this instance, it's slightly different, and it's a little bit around the other way, insofar as Ausgold owns the land and hopefully lots of potential deposits, and our exploration program will unearth those in due course, but it's going to build the mill. And I think when you look at those two things together, and that does take a little bit of patience and an ability to look forward and see what the program will be, but there will be, in the next few years, a significant mill built at Katanning, which will be able to service a very wide area. And if you look at what that means from the burden of what a deposit or a new discovery has to be, it's a lot lower than it is when it's a standalone. So I think that's the key for me. I think, sort of take the project as it is today, do your numbers, look at the value. I think that's compelling in its own right, but then have something of a lottery ticket on what the future might hold. And if this is in fact its own unique gold district under the control of one company, then this is potentially, a very, very significant returning investment. So that's why I'm here, and I encourage your viewers to take a look at it through that lens. And, maybe it's not today, but maybe keep an eye on our progress and see how we go, and maybe you'll jump on board in some time in the future.
Thanks very much, John. That was a great way to finish up, and something definitely a thought to leave with everyone who's watching and with shareholders as well. So, look, John, thank you for joining us from Melbourne this morning. And thank you to Matt as well here in Perth. It's been great to have you both, and it was great to have a chat about the project last week in Perth. Sorry, I'm just going to quickly throw one last question at you that's just popped up on the online portal. What is that saying? Yeah, okay. No, sorry, that wasn't a question. I think I've already dealt with that one. So, look, thanks very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you to everyone who sent questions in, and just a reminder that a recording of this presentation will be available through the company's socials and website, and emailed out to everyone who participated later today. So thanks for listening to the Ausgold story, and we look forward to keeping you informed about the progress of this company in the coming weeks and months. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.